So far, we've just been looking at single notes. We've been looking at note names, how to write them on the staff, and where we find them on the piano. We will now look at something that we call chords. And to define chords is pretty simple. That's when we do more than just one single note at a time. It's when we make two or more sound together. And that creates a harmony or a chord. The first type of chord that we will look at is the type called triad. And a triad means that it's a chord that consists of three notes. So playing three notes together, that creates a chord that's called a triad. There are two different ones that we will look at, two different types of triads, major or minor. That's a very basic way of looking at chords. We will look at what they sound like, but you will probably pretty simple hear the difference. And the most common way that people describe how they experience the major and the minor chords is that the major chord sounds a bit more happy and cheerful, while the minor sounds heavier and darker and just sadder. The way we write them and indicate them is that a major chord is just written with a capital letter. So the chord name is written with a capital letter, then you have to understand that it's a major chord. It will just say that capital letter. If we're dealing with a minor chord, you write the chord name as a capital letter, but then it would just be a major. If you want it to be a minor, you add an M after. So just a capital letter means that you are dealing with a major chord. If it's a capital letter with an M added to it, then it's a minor chord. We'll now look at how to create chords, and we'll create an understanding of how they're built up so that we can create any major or minor chord. What you start with is a single note, and then we'll build on the other two. As I mentioned before, we're going to look at triads, and we'll be building them, and we'll building them one note at a time out of the three notes. The one you start with, we call the root. The root is a single note, and what it has in common with the chord is that they've got the same name. So the root note, the single note, is the same name as the chord has its name. Here are some examples. For example, if we're dealing with the major chord called D, then the root note is a D note. So remember, a chord has several notes, while a single note is just one. So if the chord is D, then the note that's a root note is also a D. If the chord is A minor, like it says here, then the root note is the A. So we're looking at the first part of the chord name to find what the root note is. Here's another example. If we're looking at this, then you would pronounce this as F sharp minor. Then the root note is an F sharp. So if the chord is sharp, you have to include that in the root note. So any chord that's got a sharp or flat, you need to use that to find the root as well. Now we'll get to how to build the chord. We mentioned the root note and how that is the same name as the chord, and that will be our starting point. And we will have a certain chord here as an example. The example we'll have is the C chord. We'll start with the C major. So we know that we want to find three different notes. The first one is pretty simple because it's the same note as the chord has a name. So the C major chord, then the root note is C. So that's pretty simple to find. The second note of a C chord is an E. And we're going to try and figure out the distance between the notes so we create an understanding for how to build the chord. The distance from a C to an E we can count by counting the keys, but it's very, very important that we count all the keys. Otherwise it's going to end up where, as we don't have black keys, sharps and flats in between some of them, it will be ending up wrong if we don't count all. So we need to count the sharps and the flats as well in between the natural notes. So the first one, the red dot to the left, is on the C. After that we have a C sharp. The note after that is the D. The note after that is D sharp. And then we're on the E, which is where the second dot is. So if we count the keys starting on the C with C sharp, that's one, D, that's the second, D sharp, that's the third, and then E is on the fourth key after the first one. So this gives us the distance from the first to the second, that we have to count 4 keys and include all the black and white keys on the way. So the root, and then we count 4 keys. So if you look out to the left, you will see the steps. First step, find the root. Second step, count 4 keys for the second note. The next one we have is a G. So I'm just giving you the notes here so we can figure out how to build them. The third note and the last one of a C major chord is the G note. And we'll do the same thing now. We'll count our way. So we pick it up where we left with the E, the second note. So if we count the notes, then after the E, going to the right is the F, because there are no sharps and flats in between E and F. Then we have the F sharp, and then we're up on the G. So counting those keys means that we start on the E, and then we go one step, that's the F. Second key, that's the F sharp, and the third is the G. So we counted 3 keys to get to the third note of the chord. So if you look out to the left, we have the 3 steps that we take. We find the root of the chord, then we count 4 keys, and then from that note we count another 3 keys. Then we ended up with a formula, and this is the formula for building any major chord. So it's the root, go 4 keys to the right, and then another 3 keys from that to the right, and we have it. What I want you to do is to start gathering formulas for different chords. The formula for the major chord then is like we have it out to the right. And I want you to get a piece of paper where you will put with the rest of your music papers and write down that formula. And I recommend that you pause the video and get a paper so you can save this for later. The way I want you to write it is like this. So you have a clear box where you know that this is something important. This is a formula for a chord. And you write that the type of chord is a major, and then you can simplify it by just writing R for root plus 4 plus 3, and that should tell you how to figure out how to do major chords. We'll try this out now. We'll try our formula by trying to create an A major. So an A major chord would just be written with a capital A. We start out with the root, and the root of the chord is of course the same as the chord name. So we start with an A. That's our first key. Then if we follow the formula, we would have to count 4 keys to the right. So that's starting on the A. Next would be A sharp or B flat, and the next one is B. After that is C, and then the 4th key is the C sharp. So here is where we find the second note of the A major chord, and we counted 4 keys including all white and black, all sharps and flats and natural. Next thing it says on the formula is to count another 3 keys, so we'll do that. We'll count from the C sharp, and then the first one is D, next is D sharp, and then the third key is E. So here's where you find the third key and the chord is complete. Take a look at the formula and where you have the red dots that indicates the notes of the chord to really make sure that you understand how to count your way to the right notes. We'll now move over to the other type of chord, the minor, and the red dots are still up for the A major like we just created, but now we will look at the formula for minor chords and see how we can transform this A major into a minor. I've given you the formula here. So the formula says root, and then you count 3 keys and then another 4. And that's a bit different because on the major, if you look at the paper where you have the major formula, this is slightly different. So we'll try that out. We start with a root, so that would be in the same place because it's still an A type of chord, so in this case A minor. But now if we start on the A and we count 3 keys, that means we have from the A, next key we have is A sharp, and then B, and then we have the C. So we would have to change it so that instead we're counting 3 keys first, and if we continue from that key and count another 4, we would end up on the same as we did for the major. So here's our minor chord, an A minor, not so very different from the major, but it would sound very different. I'd like you to add this formula to your paper so that you have the formulas gathered, and simplify it by writing that a minor chord is R for root, and then you count 3 keys, and from there you count another 4, and that's your 3 notes that you need for a minor chord. So right now on that paper you should have 2 different formulas, one for doing a minor chord and one for doing a major chord, and they look pretty similar, so you have to be careful when counting them. And by using this you could figure out any major or minor chord that you could possibly think of.